Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. And today's Doctor Who review is none other than classic Doctors, modern monsters, or new monsters, broken memories. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it with the Body Snatchers. The Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith come upon a giant grasshopper who seems to have been cut open, and the Doctor begins to suspect foul play. But he doesn't quite know what's at hand, and so as he investigates further, he looks in and finds himself in a world full of trouble. Him and Sarah then come face to face with Harmony Shoal, a alien race of brains which inhabit other people's bodies by using their brains and pretty much putting them into the bodies and removing the original brain. So, body snatching. The Doctor pretends to be one of these animated corpses in hopes that it will allow him to be able to take over Harmony Shoal's operation and stop them from letting another ship land and snatching those bodies. Sarah, of course, falls for this, believing the Doctor to have actually given up. She becomes a bit gullible in this story and realises that, oh, hold up, no, the Doctor was just playing along. Sadie Miller's performance as Sarah Jane Smith, as always, is absolutely impeccable in this story. I also love that she gets her own time to kind of thrive at like the beginning of this story, because she's not always with the Doctor. She kind of goes off and does her own investigation. Now on to the next one, the Queen of Clocks. The Sixth Doctor and Melanie Bush go into a castle that seems to be under siege. Clockwork droids are trying to break in, and the 11th hour is closing at hand. Will they be able to save the human beings inside the castles from the ongoing relentless attacks, or will something else stir further in the dark? After saving the people in the castle, the Doctor and Mel find themselves locked in a dungeon. But to make matters even stranger, it turns out that this colony of people count the hour, each hour of the clock, maybe keeping an eye on it to make sure that they are one step ahead of the droids, or maybe for the same reasons as the droids. The Doctor and Mel are locked up for being accused of being droid spawn. Droid spawn are essentially human beings that have been ripped apart and replaced atomically by droids, building flesh and bones and pretty much anything else you can imagine on top of a droid. The Doctor comes up with a plan, finding out that the Queen is expecting her son to arrive, although it turns out her son doesn't arrive because he doesn't detect any life forms on the planet. The Doctor accidentally commits genocide, one of the worst things he's ever done in his life, by turning off all the clocks at the strike of midnight. He doesn't quite realise what he's done until the effects hit him in both of his hearts. Mel tries to reassure him the fact that it wasn't his fault, but he points out that it was because they weren't listening properly. Even though they convinced all the indoor droid spawn to smash up all the clocks, they didn't listen carefully enough and realised that all the people were slowly ticking away. The Queen of Clocks, I've got to say, is one of my favourite stories in this box set, because honestly, it broke my heart hearing the Sixth Doctor realise he's made a mistake that bad. I mean, the Sixth Doctor's done a lot of things in his time. He's met a talking penguin, he's been on trial, but this idea of him committing genocide by accident, especially on life forms that he didn't realise weren't human, is just such a heartbreaking concept. It was such a twist that I really did not expect it. The next story, The Silent Priest, follows along with the Eighth Doctor, played by Paul McGann, who lands on a planet full of gangsters and he goes to a church to confess. The Doctor begins to get wrapped up in a mystery when he realizes that no one in the church who goes to confess can remember why they don't remember anything. They can't get any further than the church confession dial, and it all seems to revolve around a certain room. The Doctor himself goes into the church and confesses to the priest, a Silence, who has been located on Earth as a part of his mission to pretty much learn everything he can about the human race. As the Doctor gets attacked by some gangsters and chucked in a boot, he finds himself wrapped in a crossfire. But then his silent priest turns up once again and explains to him that he hopes to make a difference. Inspired by the Doctor's actions throughout time and space, the silent priest is in hope that he will be able to prevent the war from continuing. And so he does by removing certain elements and getting one boy to confess to the murder of someone's brother. But this all comes with a consequence. Even after the bloodshed, even after all of it, the consequence comes that the Doctor tries to convince the Silence to go home, to go back to the church and move on. But the Silent is too inspired to stop his work and so continues and joins up with two of the fellow gangsters and becomes the head boss of a casino on the planet. The final story in this box set, The Silent City, follows the 7th Doctor returning to the planet which the 8th Doctor had been on and investigating exactly what's happened. It turns out that the planet is finally at peace under the rule of the Silent Priest. Although the 7th Doctor at the time doesn't realise this, all he knows is anyone who goes into the casino and meets the boss seems to remember him as a very likeable person. But whether his name or his presence makes any difference seems to be the interesting factor in their story. They can't quite seem to remember the manager all that well. All they know is he was well dressed and a very likeable person. The Doctor finds this very strange, and of course, suddenly he begins to realise that the crime lords of the city have started to wake up again, all after a rich businessman goes in and disturbs the balance of a casino. This all happens because of the fact of his daughter pretty much going in and losing some money. The people at the casino don't want to be sued, so of course they take him to the boss in hopes that they will be able to settle the deal. When this doesn't work out, they decide to kidnap and abuse the old man and explain to him if he doesn't tell the police that it was all a setup in the first place, that they will make his life very, very hard for him. The Doctor goes to confront the father after this incident in hopes of getting more answers. He doesn't quite believe his story that it was all a setup, and neither does the police to an extent. But they have no proof, and of course, it makes their case even harder to understand. After leaving the home of the father, the Doctor helps out a poor woman in the street who we later go on to learn has a bit of a comeuppance. A mysterious stranger approaches her in the street and points out that she has money in the bank. She goes from rags to riches. The situation gets worse though as it escalates, as it turns out that the Silent Priest is under strict intervention after the papal mainframe catch up with him. It turns out that him interfering with the history of the planet has been noticed, and of course all the Silents are emerging on him in hopes of destroying him in the process. The Doctor intervenes and points out the fact that this is stupid and pointless. They shouldn't interfere with the Silent's doings, as even though he may have interfered with history, it hasn't affected the causal nexus. He is a young being of their species and should be treated as so. An inspirational young man who quite clearly has gone to another planet and has intermingled with their society, but not by on purposely manipulating and changing events. Silence clear off and everything goes back to normal. When the Doctor goes back to his TARDIS, he finds a note from his future self talking about the fact that he had also arrived on the planet but can't seem to remember why. He can't remember the person he was looking for, and this makes life even more challenging, so he left. But he hopes that the seventh incarnation of the Doctor figured everything out in the end. So, what did I think of Broken Memories as a whole? I loved it. It had its ups, it had its downs. I definitely loved the comedy between Sadie Miller and Tom Baker. I loved the comedy between Colin Baker and Bonnie Langford. And I really loved the dark moments in this box set between Colin Baker and. No, not Colin Baker. The dark moments between Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann. This box set is an absolute testament to this range and is one of the greatest collections I've listened to so far. The big standout stories in this so far have got to be the Body Snatchers and the Queen of Clocks. Two heartbreaking stories where there are revelations as the story progresses. In the Queen of Clocks, it's the death of all the clock people. In the Body Snatchers, it's the fact that Sadie Miller's character has been walking around with a bunch of people that she doesn't realise have already been turned into brain hosts. That's not to dull down the fact that the last two stories were also really good, The Silent City and The Silent Priest. Both stories really elevating on this idea that we've seen the silence on TV. We've seen them in The Astronaut. We've seen them in The Wedding of River Song. We've seen them on Trenzalore. We've seen them when Melody Pond is turned into the astronaut. But we aren't really given that much time on screen to explore. Maybe the silence have other options of life. And at least these stories really kind of solidified that idea of every alien in the Doctor Who universe doesn't necessarily have to be evil, nor does it have to play with the kind of lore and events of what we see on screen. Sometimes when we have aliens on screen, it's like they're the villain, they're destroying things, they're gonna be the big bad boss. But of course, through these audios and through novels and through expanded media, we get to learn that they have more to their characters than meet the eye. And for that reason, I give Broken Memories a solid 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching. We will see you in another Doctor Who review. Until then, stay beautiful, you gorgeous people. And goodbye for now.